recording this. Okay, so welcome back to CIS 5620. It's Thursday, 9/3/2020, and today we are covering the concept from chapter 2. And this concept are basically supposed to help you supplement what is already posted under the week 2. So when you click on the to-do list, there's a lot of items right here, but these are just for your own consumption. The only things that are going to be graded are the ones that are in blue, which is finalize and submit exercise number 1, and then contribute and respond to discussion number 1. Now, by now, you should have established contact with your group members, and the way you do that is by clicking on the groups, and then we have all these people who have been put into different groups. You click on your group, and the group should have a name. So that was the first assignment. So you'll pick your own group, and then you decide and come up with a group. Your colleagues to make sure that you're in communication with them, and on like that. So you're going to be doing the first discussion board as a group project, and I want to see some exchange of information. So you'll be creating some threads here as part of the group, and on like that. If you're having any issues with this, let me know. I understand there are still some group members who make sure you do that so that at least everybody knows what is going on. Okay, having looked at that, we'll go back to the week 2. And by now, most of you already started working on the interview with the project manager. So that's the part that you're going to be finalizing. And then you'll come to the access portion and you click on the link for submitting, and you should be able to find it right there. So these are the two things that I'll do by the end of this week. So under the LAN, you find we have a lot of items here. We have some items on the videos. You can watch that. A day in the life of a project manager. That's for your own consumption. You can download this, create a binder, put them there, and then you can go back and read them maybe later on. And the same thing with the videos here. If you watch these videos, like I mentioned before, they'll give you some ideas about how to go about working with the Microsoft project. Now, you don't need to buy Microsoft project. I think you should be able to access Microsoft project through the Eagle apps. And if you have a problem with that, remember you can call the IT Eagle department, which is through extension 7676. They should be able to walk you through about how to go about getting Microsoft Word, Excel access through Eagle apps. So you don't need to be buying those software. Okay, so like I mentioned, we'll go through week 2, and I will briefly go through the PowerPoint slide, and I'm going to share that with you here. And as I'm doing that, any questions so far?
No questions yet.
Okay, so let me share this application window. Okay, so this is week 2, and there's a lot of items here. So I'll go through the key points. The learning objectives, you're supposed to be describing what we call the systems view of project management. And systems view comes from what you call the systems thinking, where you have to think of something in its entirety, and we look at that in more details. We'll be looking at organizations, and we have to look at how companies are structured. That's what we call the 4 frames of the organization. We're going to be looking briefly at the culture of the organization, because anytime that you're working on a project, the culture of the organization directly or indirectly and positively or negatively impacts the project. So we'll be looking at that. We're going to look at how you should be able to manage the stakeholder, and especially the people who are in the top echelons of the organization, and why it is very important for you as a project manager to establish good relationship with the top management team. We'll also briefly look at what you're calling the project phases. So you've had the concept of a project having a life of its own. And yesterday, when we were talking about a project, we said a project is unique. It has a specific beginning and a specific end time. So anything that has a beginning and an end, it means that it has a life. So we are going to be looking at the different stages of the project that a project has to go through and what happens in each of those stages. Now we talk a little bit about IT projects. If you are in IT, that's okay. If you're not in IT, you don't have to worry. But like I mentioned, most of these concepts are applicable to projects in other areas. We'll also look at how globalization and outsourcing and the virtual teams and what you call agile is affecting how companies are doing with project. Now we have seen that most of the companies, because of COVID, they have their employees working from home, so a lot of virtual teams, and that is having impacts on projects. So we'll be briefly looking at that. Okay, so if we start, we're saying that projects cannot be run in isolation. Now, as MBA students, there is something that I think you should be familiar with, and that is what you call the Porter's comparative model. And because I only have a few of you in here, sometimes it becomes a little bit, it'll be nice if we have more students and you can have kind of like interaction, because I like to kind of like quiz the students so I can see your participation. But what I'll do is I'll bring up what's called the Porter's comparative model here. Are you familiar with that concept? Porter's five forces model.
Yes.
Okay, can somebody briefly describe what it is all about? What is Porter's five forces about? And feel free, if you make a mistake, that's fine. You don't have to be scared of making a mistake. It's part of learning. Anybody sharing?
I just got here.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll share this with you and I'll talk about it. And this is very important. Anytime that you're working on a project, most of the companies, when they're implementing project, is because the project is trying to achieve one of these objectives. Let me see whether it pops up the way I want it to show up. And then I can come back. No, that's not what I wanted to show. Okay, give me 1 minute. I'll go back and share something much better. I think that should be it. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is something you can very easily Google, and you just go on the internet and you just say Porter's PORTEL five forces, and it's gonna give you a lot of information. But there is this concept in management about this professor. He's from Harvard, and he came up with this concept that says that every company has to be aware of this model. So when a company is doing business, they have to be aware of this, what he calls the five forces. So there is the library among the existing competitors. So most of the companies, they have competitors and they're trying to outdo each other. So they'll be coming up with projects to make sure that they are staying ahead of the competition. So if it's Walmart, they have to come up with concepts that will make sure that they are trying to outdo what Amazon is doing. And I think from the news yesterday, they said now Walmart is actually trying to do what Amazon is doing by offering something similar to what we call Amazon Prime. So that is usually what we call the library among the existing competitors. And then we have the bargaining power of the suppliers. So you have to make sure that you as the company, Walmart, the suppliers are not more powerful than the Walmart, because what can happen is they can increase the prices and on like that. The bargaining power of the buyers. So with the bargaining power of the buyers, Walmart has to make sure that the customers are not that powerful, and then make sure that they are not getting other alternative items from other sources. So the bargaining power of buyers, what companies try to do is to loop in or tie in the customers. And this is very common. It used to be very common with the cell phone companies. They used to tie you into a contract. The same thing with cable company. They used to tie you into a contract. But now what most of the cell phone companies are doing is they're giving you a free phone and they tell you don't have to pay for that phone, just pay $20 a month for whatever period. So that is kind, in a way, they're making sure that they control you, so that you cannot move to other competitors. And then you have the threat of substitute products and threat of new entrants. So you can read a little bit more on this in more details, but basically what I'm trying to do is anytime that the company is trying to come up with a project, that project has to be aligned with the organizational strategy. So for Walmart, we know that Walmart is based on the cost, is what's called the cost leadership. Okay, so they try to make sure that their products are priced at a lower price. So anything they're doing is geared towards that. If it's a company like Apple, they are more on the innovation side. They try to make things that are sleek, things that are very good. So theirs is more on the innovation side, and on like that. So projects cannot be done in isolation. They have to be done in line with the company's strategy. Okay. So when you're working on a project, you have to have what you're calling the systems thinking, and that is a holistic view of carrying out the project within the context of the organization. And by that, we mean it's the same way. We are taking maybe this class, project management, but you have to look at your whole curriculum. So your MBA is made up of all those different classes that you're taking, and you have to make sure that for you to be successful, you have to be successful in all your classes so that you can maybe get out there, and if you're not already working, get a good job or get promotion and things like that. So a system is nothing else but is made up of components that all work together to achieve a common objective. If you have a pen, that's a very simple example of what we call a system. If you have a car, that is a system. If you have a phone, that's a system, because the phone has different components all working together. So that's what we call the systems thinking. And I think there are some videos that will actually tell you a little bit more information on what's called the systems theory. Because now at the MBA level, you also need to start learning about what we call management theory. And when we talk about the theory in general, some people think of theory as just some concept that have not been proven, but in academia, theory means concept that have already been proven. Okay, so there's that concept that they talk about in the video about the systems thinking, the systems theory, and it's that concept of holistic thinking. Okay, so we have to make sure that the projects are supporting the current business needs and also looking at what the company is heading to in the future. So they talk about a little bit about the system philosophy, and then you talk about the systems analysis. And with the systems analysis is whereby when you're solving a problem, you have to look at the different components about how that problem can be solved. So don't just look at one piece. If you have you're working as a human resource manager and you have employees who are not doing very well, maybe somebody comes to work late, don't just look at the person coming in late. Try to look at their past. Have they been coming late for quite some time? Is this something that just started? Is there any change in their lifestyle? Is there something that's happening at home? And you can do this by sometimes talking to the employee or maybe interviewing other people who have contact with the employee. So that is what we're talking about. The systems analysis is problem solving approach that looks at the holistic picture. So we apply that to management and we come up with the concept of what you're calling systems management. Okay, so you're looking at the business, and then you're looking at the technology, and then you look at the organization as a whole. So before you work on a project, you look at that. So they give you a small example here of a university that is trying to ensure that the freshmen, when they come in, they're given a laptop, and before they arrive at that decision, they have to apply what you're calling systems management, and they're looking at the three main different concepts. Now, this is not always going to be three components, but for this university, they are looking at it from three perspectives. In some organization, it can be four, it can be five. You can define the areas that you're going to be concentrating on. Okay, so on the business side, they're looking at things like the cost. They're looking at how much it's going to cost the students, and they're looking at the support, whether they need to hire people who are going to be supporting those students. Because if you give them laptops and then they have problem with those laptops, they need somebody who is going to help them. So that's part of the cost. Okay, so before you arrive at that decision to give the students laptop, you have to consider all these different facts. Okay, so you look at the organization, you look at the technology. Okay, will more power cords be required in the classroom? Because if the students bring in the laptop, the classroom, they need somewhere to connect. Okay, are they going to be required to be bringing their power cords, or are we going to be supplying the power cords in the classroom? Okay, so that's part of what you're calling the systems management. And when you're working on a project, you'll be doing this in what is called the requirements, because now this is going to be a project. Okay, so you are going to be going through what's called the requirements management, where you're going to be gathering the data and then you have to quantify this, and that's how you arrive at the cost of a project. Okay, because if you're going to be providing cables, that's going to cost you something. Okay, okay, if the tablets are going to affect the networks and the speed, we might have to buy some routers. That is the cost. So you add up all those items after you've gone through your requirements, and then you come up with the project, the cost of the project. And then you look at how long is it going to take for us to do those things. And then you arrive at what is called the schedule based on what is the scope that you're doing. So in this case, the scope will be providing the students with what? With the laptops. Are we together?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the other concept you're going to be looking at is what you're calling the perspectives on organization. And this is usually how the companies are structured and how the structure impacts the project. So we have what you're calling the structure of forms, and this is how the jobs are defined in the organization and what you call the roles and the responsibilities. So if you have somebody who is an accountant, what is their job? If you have somebody who is working marketing, what are they doing? And usually some of this information is going to be shown in what you're calling the organizational charts. So most of the companies will actually have this information. Like I mentioned yesterday, when you go to a company's back end, you'll be able to find information about the organizational structure, like who's the CEO, who are the board members, and all that. Also, we look at the human resource frame. So this is concerned with making sure that your employees are taken care of. And there are some companies that when people used to go to work, now at least most people are working from home. We have companies around here, I think like Cisco. If you go to Cisco, they don't even call their location a workplace, they call it campus. So if you go to Cisco campus, they have basketball courts there. They actually have a dispensary in there. Okay, so you go to work, and like we went there with some students at 11 a.m. and some guys who are shooting hoops at 11 a.m. Okay, and that's normal because people are given the job, and then you don't have somebody who is looking behind you to see what you're doing. People are responsible. So if you feel you want to go shoot some hoops, the company has provided those resources. They have a cafeteria. You don't have to go out. They provide you with a cafeteria. And then you look at the way the workplace is organized, is kind of more user friendly. So that's what you're calling the human resource frame. We're looking at what's calling the political frame. So as a project manager, you need to know people who push the buttons in the organization. And there is a concept that you'll hear, what is called political capital. So you need to know people who are in top management and people who can rely on you, people who can carry your water. Because as a project manager, there might come a time when you have a problem with a certain cast client or stakeholder, and you need somebody who can petition for you. So if you have some people in the higher echelons in the organization, they can help you with that. So that's what you're calling the political frame, things like the coalitions and things like that. And that sometimes help with conflict and making sure that you know people who are in charge of resources. And then we have what you're calling the symbolic frame. So this is things like the symbols and meanings. If you go to a place like Walmart, they don't call their employees customers. I think they call them associates. And then they have like a uniform that they wear. Okay, the same thing with airline. If you're with Southwest, their workplace is very relaxed. Most of the employees, when you get on board, they kind of have like a relaxed, joking nature, things like that. So that's part of the organization, and that's part of what you're calling the culture. Okay, so the language, the traditions, the image that people project in that organization, and that sometimes impacts the performance in the organization. Now, there are some things in the organization as part of the culture that are actually not good. And we have had cases whereby some companies have had something going on for some time, and somebody comes and says, "Oh, that's how we do things here." And sometimes that's not right. Okay, there's that myth about the boys and the locker room talk. And you know, a few years ago, that was all over the news. Okay, and we know that sometimes is not positive, but that's part of what you're calling the symbolic frame. So the way you project things, how company operates and institutions can be defined in terms of the symbolic frame. So like in the military, they have this concept, no man what? They don't leave no man behind. So that's part of their culture. And people will put their lives at the risk to make sure that they take care of their colleagues. Okay, I have your back, and on like that. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so this is the slide that shows you some information about some companies, and they say some things that did not work very well. So I'm checking to make sure that I'm sharing the right thing. We're on the organizational structure. Okay, so this is how the companies are usually structured. And for the PMP or the CAPM exam, they like to ask you, you'll find a question about, most likely there's a 90% chance you'll get a question that is talking about the structure of the organization. So usually we have three. There's what's called the functional, and then there's what you call the project, and then there's what you call the matrix. So with the functional, that shows who is on top and who is reporting to who. And I think there's an assignment that you're going to be working on for this week. And this assignment is going to be coming from where? So I'm going to close all these slides and leave just one here. And I'm going to share this screen with you so I can show you how to get this information. So the assignment actually, because you don't have to stay here all through. Some might want to leave a little bit early, so I'll go a little bit back and talk about the assignment, then I'll come back here. This is for which week are we? Are we in week 2?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so assignments for week 2, where are they? Okay, let me share something different here, and bear with me, I keep moving around a lot. I want to make sure that we have the right assignments. The assessment. Yeah, so this discussion board question, you can see that. Okay, so the discussion board question, and I think this one is supposed to do as a group, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so this discussion, you're supposed to look at the three organizational structures. So we have the functional, project, and matrix, and you say culture is a set of shared assumptions. We mentioned about that, behaviors that characterize the functioning of an organization, blah, 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 blah. So pick two companies that you're familiar with and belong to different industries, target, blah, 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 and then conduct an internet search of the company. Okay, so one of the ways that you can do this, when you talk about the industries, so there is a concept that is called the Porter's, not Porter, that's called the SIC code, Standard Industry Classification Code. So let me show you how you can do that, because you might need this also for your other classes. So if you go to a browser and you say SIC code, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating this for somebody who might have been here yesterday. I did not record it, so that's why I'm going through it, and then I'm going to record it. So we have what's called the Standard Industry Classification Code, the SIC code, and this shows you like the difference. So every business in the US is classified under these numbers, and they are given a certain code. So let me see whether we can see the codes. So this is how the numbers are. So they have what you call the division A to J, and then they have the code. Usually is a 4-digit code, and sometimes it'll be like 10,014. So that's for all the companies that have something to do with mining. Any company that has anything to do with construction will be in the 1517. Anything to do with manufacturing will be in the 2039, and then on and on like that. So finance, insurance, and real estate will be in the 6067. So that's the standard industry classification code. So if you click, for instance, on the retail, that will give you like also the different categories of the companies that are in the retail.
Excuse me,
So
sir.
yes.
Yeah, my bad. My internet was cutting off a little bit, so in the beginning I didn't catch how you got there.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
No,
So
you good.
you
It's
just
mine.
type let me, this is the one. Yeah, so you type SIC code. I'll briefly go back. You go to Google and you type SIC code, and then you come down here and you can look at like the one that is, so you want to go to this one here, NAIC. This is the new one, but you can still use the SIC code down here. So this is, click on this, and this will give you all these different classifications. So companies are classified based on these codes. And if you look at like manufacturing is 2039, all the companies that have to do something with the manufacturing, they are going to be in this classification. The title is manufacturing, and then you can click down here and you have, forget about this information up here. This is where it's important. So you have all the ones that dealing with the food and kindred products, all the way meat packing, creamery butter, all the way like that. And they give you a small description of what they are, and then they go into even more details. And usually sometimes they'll tell you how many of those businesses are in the US. So you don't have to cram this, but at least have an idea. That's how companies are usually classified, because you might see this somewhere when you're reading standard industry classification code. So what you'll do is you'll go to, for instance, I say Target. Target is in the retail industry. So you go to Target, and when you click on Target, then you come here. So this is what you call the front facing or the front end of an organization. When you type that name, it gives you what the customers are saying, but that's not what we're interested in. We want to go to the back end. We want to see what's going on with this company. Who are the leaders in this company? What is their organizational culture? So for most of the companies, what you want to do is you want to browse all the way at the bottom. And then you can come down here either to like more, okay? And then from the more, sometimes you'll see something about us, or you can go to corporate. Okay, you can go to investor relations, I'm sorry, investor relations. So investor relations, most of the companies will give you the information about the stocks, how the company is doing in the stock, and they give you the annual report if you want to see the reports that they issue to the shareholders. And this usually will include what the company is doing, what is their strategy, and things like that. And then if you look down here, you can see things like the corporate responsibility and then the board of directors, executive officers. So this is telling you about the function, how this company is structured. So if you look at the executive officers, you can see information about this company right here. So this is the board chair and the CEO and things like that. So these are the top guys here. Now this can tell you a little bit about the culture in this company. In terms of the female, they have a high number of females in this company. Okay, so that at least gives you some information about what's going on in this company. Okay, and then if you come back here, and sometimes you might have to play around with this, you can look at things like the corporate responsibility to see what this company is doing, and then you can also come back and are we still together? Yep. So remember, I went through more, and we went through the investor relations. Okay, so about the social, you can see about what this company is doing. This is how they are trying to reach their customers. So that tells you a little bit about their culture in terms of technology. They seem to be savvy in terms of technology, but I'm also trying to look at something about how they investor relations, something about the culture of this company. Where do they get their products in terms of things like globalization and things like that? Do they have that information here? For some of the companies is right there. For others, you have to dig a little bit. Responsible employer. So let's look at that. Okay, very good. So you can see something about the team member. So this is telling you about the culture of the company. Civic activity, community. Okay, so this is what they are doing in the community, and this can tell you a little bit more about the company. And then you can look at things like diversity and inclusion and on. And so there's a lot of things that you can read here about the company. And at least, so this is what you're going to be doing. So you'll get a company like this. So that's one. And then you can come back and give me another company that you want to look at. Can somebody give me a suggestion?
Belk, Belk,
Belk?
yeah.
Okay, so let's do Belk. Now remember, Belk might be in the same industry with Target.
Oh, okay.
Probably no. Target is in retail, so I'm not sure. Belk is in what? Department store.
Yeah, department store.
Okay,
That's why I used to work.
okay. So this is bulk. So we can go right here, and then this is gonna give us the same way. This is the front facing. That's not what we want. So we want to go, and usually most of it is at the bottom. We go the way at the bottom, and this is a lot. Okay, let's see. We get there, and choose about bulk. Did something happen? Oh, I gotta close this, the 10% thing. Okay, so let's see. Vendor. So is this a publicly traded company?
I don't know for sure.
Okay, let's see. We'll find about bulk careers, catalog brands, newsroom behind the brand, vendor resources, store events. Yeah, because usually most of them they will have some information about the investors. I don't see it here. Now we can actually find that really quick. So let's see here and say bulk stocks. Uh, okay, I don't see anything about their stocks. But all in all, let's see whether you can find information. You should be able to find information about their.
Oh, we can try Apple if that's a different department altogether, a different industry altogether. So
Okay, so we can actually also go through the news. So I went through the news,
okay,
like at the bottom, and then I can see the leadership team.
right.
Okay, so that tells me, so under the leadership, I can see who are the guys who are leading this team here, and it tells you they have a female CEO. See that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay, so that's something positive depending on how you look at that. Okay, and then they have the press releases, so you can see what is going on here. You see they are donating things and they are supporting and philanthropy, so that also tells you a little bit about their culture. Okay, and then maybe one more. Apple, you said. So we click on Apple and see how their website is simple. Okay, and then you go all the way down and you have information down here about investors, about Apple investors. Okay, so about Apple, and then you have the investors. So down here, you should be able to find information about their leadership. You see, we have some information here,
Your
investor
screen froze.
relations.
Your screen froze at
Oh,
Bell. At Bell.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, oh, I think it opened into a different page. Yeah, it's actually frozen. Still at bulk. I'm sorry. Okay, you can see bulk and Apple. Can you see Apple? Okay, and I know I'm digressing a little bit here, but this is good for the assignment. So you can see that now. Did it kick you out? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see the Apple now.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Apple, and we went all the way down here, and usually you'll find that under the investor. So under the investors, and let's see, we got the leadership and governance right here. So if you click on that, it tells you about the profile. So that's the CEO and the guys who are there. Okay, so these companies have very few number of minorities. Silicon Valley, they're trying to improve on that, and I think they have issued a couple of press releases saying how they're trying to do that. But if you do very well and you're good at what you do, you got a high chance of getting into these companies. So those are their board of directors. So that tells you a little bit about their function and how they are structured. And then you can look at the Apple values. Okay, so you look at things like education. What are they doing on the education? So that's part of the culture. Giving product support and support schools that need most. Okay, so that's how they're helping in education. And you can read that at your own time. If you come back, This was about the values. You can look at the environment. What are they doing with the environment, inclusion and diversity? Okay, what are they trying to do different? Okay, and you can see they're trying to show you that they are at least diverse, and maybe there are some things that they are doing to ensure that 50% of new hires in the US are from historically underrepresented groups in the tech. Okay, you can see that. So that's a little bit about the culture, women at Apple, and it shows you things like that. Okay, so companies actually want to have a diverse workforce, because if you have a diverse workforce, research has shown that there is multiplicity of ideas. There is, you don't only get viewpoints from one angle. And something as I cut my finger the other day, and I had a bandage, and we all know the color of the bandage. So if I have a bandage, it's gonna be, everybody's gonna know that I have a bandage because I'm dark skinned. But if you're Caucasian and you have a bandage, people might not even notice. And those are some things that are actually done subconsciously, maybe not. Okay, but also you have to look at what you call the critical mass, because if they made some bandages that were maybe a little bit darker, will they have enough people to sell them to? But maybe they can, because maybe they'll market them to that specific group of people. So if we want to make a change in the world, we gotta be the change. Okay, any questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's part of the assignment for this week. So you'll go through that, and you
So
will,
basically, we're not writing like the different positions. We're actually trying to look at the structure, which is say they have more females than males, they have more minorities than um more
yeah,
majority.
something like that. Yeah, so
Okay,
it's kind of like to tell about the structure. And some of like the Apple and the Google, the Silicon Valleys of this world, they usually have what's called a flat structure. Like most of
okay,
the executives are kind of like on the same level. Like when you look at, like a very good example is if you look at the education institutions, it's very hierarchical. We have the chancellor, and then we have the provost, then we have the deans, then we have the chairs, all the way down like that.
right,
Most of the companies
right.
don't have that. Most of the most, what they call the most innovative companies, have what is called a flat organizational structure. It's very easy for you to gain access to the top management. They have what they call the open door policy, and that's part of the culture of the organization also. Okay, so that's
Right,
what
right.
you'll be working on. You're not going to be writing more details, just looking at the company, and then you see whether they are the same, like you mentioned, female, male, maybe a little bit of demographics, and then look at their culture. What are they doing? What are the things? How can you tell about that? The symbolism, and see what they call their people. Some companies be calling their employees team. Some, they have names that they call their employees. So give me those names. Okay, not just employees. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit here and see. We should be finishing soon, so I don't plan on keeping you long. Okay, so we have the functional, and we have the managers reporting to the CEO, and then you have what you call the project. So most of the companies are going to be structured under what you're calling the functional, all project, all matrix. So the functional is like the ones that you've been looking at. Project, usually you find this with consulting companies. Those are companies that work on projects heavily. Like most of their job is just on project, and they hire people. You work on one project, you finish that, you move to the other one, or when your project is over, they fire or they terminate all the employees. And then we have what you're calling the matrix, which is in between there. And then the matrix is actually divided into what you're calling weak and then strong, weak matrix, balance matrix, and strong matrix. So this is a small example that is showing you like the functional. We have the CEO, and then you have the vice president of engineering, manufacturing, like that. And then you have the project. So we have the CEO, and then we have the program managers. Now, you remember yesterday I said a program manager is in charge of what? A group of projects. Okay, so this program manager has a number of project managers under him, but here we're just showing as a staff. Okay, so that's for the project. And then we have the matrix. So the matrix had the CEO, and then we have program managers, and then so it's mixture of a functional and a project. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so note that for the CAPM or the PMP exam, that question will be there. Okay, they like to ask you, they give you a scenario and they ask you, is this a functional or is this a project or is this a matrix? Now, the main distinguishing characteristics in all these is the role of the project manager. So you find that in the functional, the project manager has very little authority. Okay, so the project manager's authority in the functional is very little because the companies are not basically working on projects. So they have projects, but that's not their main idea. That's not their main driver of business. Okay, so from time to time they'll do some project and they'll have a project manager, but that project manager is not very, very powerful. In a project structure, the project manager's authority is very high because that's what all the company does. Most of the companies are bringing in revenue through the projects. Okay, and then you can see in terms of the personnel who are devoted to the project, 85 to 100% in the project. And then you can see for the weak is very close to the functional, and then for the strong is very close to the what? To the project. So what you need to do is know about the functional, and then know about the project, and then the matrix, just know that the weak is much closer to the functional, and then the strong is much closer to the project, and it will be set for the exam. Okay, so in terms of the budget in the project manager controls the budget. In the functional, it is the functional manager. So here, if you have a project that is in IT, the CIO will be in charge of that budget. If you have a project that is in accounting, then the CFO will be in charge of that budget. If you have a project that is in marketing, you'll have a project manager, but the person who will be in charge of the budget in a functional will be the marketing manager, and on like that. So the chief marketing officer, if the company have that. And then you can see in terms of the role of the project manager is part-time here is full-time, and on like that. So this is a good chart for you to memorize if you're going to be doing the CAPM or the PMP exam. And when you get in the room, just do what's called memory dump and you'll be safe. Okay, so the culture is a set of shared assumptions, the values and behaviors that characterize the functioning of an organization. And we mentioned a little bit about that. So there are some things that you can actually use to identify the culture of the organization. So for us, we say that eagle is our bird, okay, and we call ourselves a what? NCCU Eagles, okay. So symbolism, eagle represents NCCU, and like the NFL teams, they have mascots, and you can see those mascots are part of the culture. They symbolize the culture. So an eagle, we say an eagle is proud, flies high, all those positive things associated with an eagle, and we aspire to be like an eagle. Okay, so the culture can be represented using symbols, and then we have the values. We know the Eagles, we value what? Service. So that's part of our culture. Okay. So research has shown that the culture of the organization impacts performance. Okay. Now, for those of you who have traveled to Africa, you might have heard something called no hurry in Africa, right?
Yeah, I'm from Africa.
Oh, you're from Africa? So what does that mean? No hurry in Africa.
What'd you say?
What does it mean? No hurry in Africa.
I don't know. I'm from West Africa, Ghana, so I don't really know if I've heard about that.
Oh, you never heard about that phrase, no hurry in Africa?
No, her now.
What about Hakuna Matata?
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So what comes to your mind when they say that?
Well, first off, the first time I heard about it was in a cartoon back in the
Lion King. Uh-huh.
right, right, and then when I was coming over here, I remember I took the South Africa Airways,
Mm-hmm.
and so I stopped at South Africa, and it's something I think they have because of the Lion King, it's become a very popular phrase, and they use it a lot. And let's say they say welcome, they added to it in a way just to motivate you in a way means just like you said, it means no worries and
Yeah,
exactly.
it means no worries, and it's actually sometimes it's characterized as that's what we call negative stereotype. It's supposed to be positive, but it can be used negatively because it means no worries, and it's the same concept with saying no hurry in Africa. So things here they are slow, and that sometimes leads to people looking at it in the negative way. Okay. So if you're going somewhere and you have an appointment with somebody and somebody is 2 hours late, they're like, yeah, okay, there's no hurry in Africa. That's how we do things here. If you're stuck in traffic, somebody can say, oh, no hurry in Africa, and on like that. But anyway, so culture, sometimes the culture of the organization can impact how a company performs. And it's very, very important as a project manager, you make sure that you understand the culture of your organization and try to look at what you call the negative stereotypes and also positive stereotypes, because that can impact the performance. So be aware of that. And also in terms of how the employees are going to be viewed in the organization. Okay, so 10 characteristics of organizational culture. We have member identity. So that means how do the members identify? So sometimes is like I said, the eagles, when you have that jersey that says you're NCCU and there is that eagle, everybody will know where you're from. Sometimes there's uniform. NFL teams, they have a uniform that they wear that everybody knows that's my team. If you're going to the football game and you wear that uniform, they expect you to be cheering that team. And then group emphasis is whereby the company looks at ensuring that you look at everybody as a whole. So that's why you hear people saying there is no I in the team. That's that concept. People focus, and then you have unit integration, and there is that star. So they say that the items that have a star are actually considered more important in ensuring that the company or the projects are more successful. So with unit integration is cohesion, whereby everybody is marching on the same beat. Okay, you're marching to the same beats of the music. Risk tolerance. That means that the company allows people to take risk and take chances. Okay, reward criteria. Are you going to be rewarding individuals or are you going to be rewarding the group? Now, some companies reward the individuals, but sometimes that can bring conflict because there is very high levels of competitiveness. And there are some guys, especially in the investment banks, who have actually made very significant losses in their companies because of that reward criteria, because these guys are paid based on how much you bring into the company. Conflict tolerance. So in a project, it's okay for you to have a little bit of conflict, not too much conflict, but a little bit of conflict. And you have seen this even in the most successful teams. Sometimes the running back, the quarterback will throw the ball at the running back and he misses, and one of them will be pissed. And you see them cussing and they are on each other's face. Next time they come back, there's a play, touchdown. So a little bit of conflict is good. Open system focus. I talked about the open door system. So some people say you can come to my office. Doors are always open. So that helps in a company. And this is part of the culture of the organization. So member identity, group emphasis, unit integration, risk tolerance, reward criteria, and conflict tolerance, and then the open system. These are good. And if they are high in the organization, there are high chances of the company's project succeeding. Okay, so the other item is on how you manage the stakeholders, and there are different techniques or methods that you can use. So in terms of the four frames of the organization, that can help you to know who are the stakeholders in the project. And the senior executive, we are saying they are very, very important. Now we're going to revisit this concept of the project stakeholders in chapter 13, and we'll go into more details about that. Okay, so sometimes we say it's very important for you to have the ear of the top management, and they give this example of the Obamacare or the healthcare.gov, that website that was supposed to come up and people go in and register, and it didn't come out very well. There were some glitches, but President Obama, that was his initiative. He formed what's called the trauma team, the Obama trauma team. Yeah, so most of the cities actually have shock trauma. So this is like a hospital where they take the critical ill patients, so who are in accident and shooting and things like that. And sometimes they operate 24 hours. And if they bring the patient in, they take care of you quickly and they try to resuscitate you and save lives. So that's the whole idea about the shock trauma. So for this project, the Obama Trauma Team, it was supposed to save the healthcare.gov. And I think they did a very good job because eventually the project was, the website was running and people were able to register. But even today, we still hear about that. So stuff happens. Okay, so if you have people who are in top management, they can help you. And usually those senior managers, they are what you call the champion. So in that case, President Obama was the champion. Okay, and he was able to put in more resources. So when you have somebody in the organization who is championing you and your project does not go very well, sometimes they can vouch for you. They'll give you more resources that you're able to continue working on your project. Okay, so resources, we talked about that. And then they also get you cooperation from other organizations. In case there's somebody who is not working with you or is not willing to work with you, they can help you if you have that. IT governance, we won't go talk about that a little. Okay, so I can skip a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Okay, so I'll briefly talk about the project lifecycle. And you're saying this is nothing else but is a collection of the project phases that defines what work will be performed in each phase and what are the deliverables and who is involved in each phase. So a deliverable is nothing else but is a product or service that is produced or provided as part of the project. So this is a question that you might see in the CAPM or the PMP exam. They always like to ask you what is a deliverable. Okay, so this is part of the vocabulary of the subject. Okay, so project lifecycle is from the beginning, and usually in the PMP or the CAPM exam, they break it down into, I think it's 5 phases. So you have initiating, where you're trying to come up with a project, and then you go through the planning, and then you go through the executing, and then you go through what is called the control and monitoring, and then the final phase, the 5th phase, is what you're calling the closing. So we'll look at this in more details as we progress, but that's part of what you're calling the project lifecycle. Okay, so in the early phases, you need the resource need is a little bit lower, but the risk is very high because you don't know what you're doing. So that's also another question that you might find. So they like to ask you the difference between the resources and the level of risk in the life of the project. And the key thing is at the beginning, you're not using a lot of resources, but the risk is very high. And then as you progress, you start using more resources, and then the risk goes a little bit lower because now you know what you're doing and you have already established yourself. So that's what happens. So note about that. Okay, so this is a simple implementation that shows you at the concept, the beginning, and then you have the development, you have the implementation, and then you have the closeout. So the CAPM breaks this actually into 5 phases. Okay, so we have the initiating, then we have the planning, we have implementation, then you have monitoring and control, and then we have the closeout or closing out the project. And you have the different deliverables that are going to be included. So things like the business case. So this business case is not like the cases that you work with. So you say that you're dealing a case, you're given a case, we have to analyze. No, a business case is actually a document that is used for justifying why do you need the project. So if you're working on a project, you have to come up with a document that justifies why do we need this project and how does this project align with the organizational strategic objectives. That's what you mean by a business case. And then you have the management plan. So that shows you from the beginning to the end what's going to be done and what's going to be done when and how much is it going to cost and things like that. And then you have to come up with the budget estimate, and you can see the different levels. So we'll be looking at what you call the WBS, or the work breakdown structure. And this is whereby you're able to break down the project into different components. So if you're building a house, then it's how many rooms in that house, what's going to be in each room. Okay, so when you go to the master bedroom, what's going to be in the master bedroom? Okay, so that's what you're calling the work breakdown structure, and it is from the work breakdown structure items whereby you're able to determine the cost of the project and also the duration of the project. Okay, because you know it takes a human being maybe 8 hours to paint one room. Okay, so if you have 5 rooms, it's going to take this number of days, it's going to take this amount of paint, and then you can determine the duration and the cost, and then you move on to another section of the room and on like that. So we'll be looking at how you can come up with the work breakdown structure and things like that. Okay, so product life cycle is used. So we're talking about the project life cycle, but you also have what you're calling a product life cycle, because in a project you can be working on a product. Okay, so if you have Apple and they're trying to come up with the next version of iPhone, that's going to be a product, and that product is going to follow a life cycle. Okay, so here we have what's called the system development lifecycle, which is used for describing the framework and the phases involved in developing and maintaining information systems. So this is usually you're going to find this if you're in IT. Okay, so we have what you're calling the predictive and adaptive. So predictive has already been determined. Adaptive is whereby it changes as you move on. So we have the requirements. You don't have specific requirements that you need, but you get the requirements as the project progresses, and it's usually what you're calling the time-based cycles. Okay, so this is some examples of what you're calling the predictive, and we have what you're calling the waterfall. So this is very similar to the one that you can have in construction. Before you start putting up the structure, you have to lay the foundation. So you'll finish the foundation, then you start laying up the structure. Then once you put up the structure, then you can start subdividing the house. When you finish subdividing the house, you can have all the different rooms, and then you can start customizing the rooms, then you can start painting, and then you bring in the furniture. So that is what you call a waterfall. Is whereby one level has to be complete before you can start the other one, or at least a big portion of the previous level has to be done before you can go to the other one, and on like that. So with Spiral is whereby you work on incremental. So you do a little bit of design, and then you do a little bit of analysis, then you do a little bit of implementation, then you do a little bit of testing, and on like that. Okay, so those are the two main different ones, the waterfall and then the spiral. You don't need to go into details about this for this class, but at least have an idea, because you might be a project manager and most of the companies actually follow this type of design. Now we'll talk about the agile towards the end, and some companies are doing that, but it has not really picked up, but it's at least, yeah, it's actually right here. So agile is another concept that is used for software development. And with Agile, we're talking about Agile being what? The process whereby you are malleable, you can change, and on like that. Okay, so phase exits and kill points. So this is another of the vocabulary that you'll come across. And we are saying that a project should successfully pass through each of the project phases in order to continue on to the next. So that's the same thing that we're talking about here. Okay, you're working on the analysis, and then you got the design, then you got the construction, and the same thing in the spiral. So usually we have this concept of what you're calling the phase exits or the kill points, and this also will come with what you call the milestone. So you'll be hearing about the milestone in project management, and you're saying you finish the foundation and you're okay that the foundation is okay. Somebody comes and certifies that foundation is okay. Now you can start putting up the structure. Once the structure is okay and somebody says it's good, that's the kill point. We're finished with that, then you can move to the next phase. So phase exit all kill points, all milestones. Okay, an example of things that probably went right, and then we looking at things like the trends, and these are affecting IT projects, but they're affecting most of the projects generally, not just IT projects. So we should be familiar with outsourcing. We should be familiar with offshoring. And of course, I'm hoping that we are familiar with virtual teams. So there might come a time when you'll be working on a project and you have to outsource. If you're listening to politics, they keep talking about the jobs overseas and trying to bring the jobs back and on like that. Okay, so virtual team, we know that most of us are working from that, and then we have the agile. Okay, so this is the new concept. Actually, they have a certification exam in the PMP that you can take for agile. So that means that you have a good understanding of this new concept. Okay, so when you are working in a global environment, you have to deal with issues of communication. So language is very important. And if you speak more than one language as a project manager, you're going to be very lucky. Yesterday, we looked at Boeing 787 Dreamliner, and we looked at all the different stakeholders who are involved in the procurement. And we saw that products are coming from Japan, South Korea, China, US, Europe, all over, different languages, different cultures. So you can see how communication is important. And then we have trust. Okay, trust means different things in different countries. Common work practices. Okay, remember I said no hurry in Africa. You got to be careful if you're dealing with companies from Africa. Not all of them, but that concept sometimes can go into the employee's mentality. And then you have the tools that you're going to be using. So as a project manager, you have to employ greater project discipline. Okay, think global but act local. Okay, what is this? McDonald's. if you go to a McDonald's in India, you're not going to find a burger, but you'll find a veggie burger. Okay, so that's what you mean by think global but act locally. McDonald's look the same all over the world, but they serve things that are what? Local. Okay, so the concept are the same, but they are thinking global but acting locally. And then keep project momentum going and make sure that you're providing your employees with the newest tools in the industry so that they can be productive. So a little bit about outsourcing here, and this is something I think you can review at your own time. And virtual teams, we are working on that. I think also that we can look at, and probably I'll finish by talking a little bit about Agile. So with Agile, I mean, I said, is a new concept that is appearing in project management, and I said there is an exam exactly for that. So read a little bit about Agile, and it has some concepts that are actually coming from rugby. So if you're a fan of rugby or not, you can actually Google this word Scrum, okay, and see that concept whereby the ball is at the bottom and everybody's trying to get the ball. So you have all the teams focused on one thing. And that is what this concept is all about when you're looking at how the project is broken. So you have a team that meets in the morning and they set a goal for maybe 2 weeks, and they say within these 2 weeks, you're going to be doing this number of items. So you don't need to cram all these, but at least have an understanding of how a Scrum framework is structured. So you have the product, and then you have the split backlog. So they create this list of the items that needs to be done, and then within these 2 to 4 weeks, they finish that that work. And then you have teams broken down, and then they meet within maybe 24 hours and things like that. So the same thing that you're working in your group, you have to decide when are you going to be meeting and when you need to be finished with your discussion board. Okay, and then you can move on to the next level, and then they meet and then they go through everything, whatever has been finished, then they can go on to the next phase, and then they go back to the beginning. So this is a good concept because it ensures that the projects, if there's a problem with the project, that problem is captured early on. Now with the waterfall, you can have a problem and that problem is not captured until way later. So the Scrum, people say usually you do more work in the Scrum, but usually it's good. It's not for all kinds of project, but there's some project that are actually suited to what you're calling the Scrum. And then we have the Kanban, which is another concept that was developed in Japan. And what they do is they use visual cues. And you have heard the concept of a picture is worth more than 1,000 words. Okay, and then so there's this exam that I mentioned about Agile, and you can take that. It's gonna certify you, and you're gonna be a hot cake. So, any questions? I think I'm gonna stop there. Do I still have some people in here?
Yes.
Okay. So, any questions?
Are these slides available online?
Yeah. So I'm gonna post these slides, and the previous ones, I think I posted them. Let me see where I posted the ones from yesterday. And the slides are available online, but now the presentation also, the one that we just went through.
Okay.
Share that. So I think I start here. So I'm not very sure where to put them because we have so many screens, so many videos. So I just put them on, when you click on start here, this is where I put the one from yesterday. And I think I'm going to pull the other one down here. So you have chapter 1 and then chapter 2. And
Okay.
then from next week, I'm going to be putting them under each week's assignment,
Okay, great.
under each week's folder. Okay. Okay, so remember the assignments that are due for this week, and you can start reading from next week. So when we meet, at least you have an idea about what you're talking about. Because I say the best thing you can do for yourself is at least make sure that you're ahead of your professors. Because that way, when we are going through the materials, you'll at least be reviewing, and then you'll also be able to see whether you are learning how to teach yourself. So I'm going to stop recording this.